Welcome! It's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and by golly, am I back with some of the most, let's call it controversial news to come out of this pretty lull time in Path of Exile. We have just received a development manifesto about harvest crafting. Now, this has been a massive contentious topic across all platforms and everyone that I've literally talked to within the community of Path of Exile. What should be done to harvest crafting in the future, right? Right before we get right into this manifesto, we're basically going to go all the way over it. If you want to basically get the TLDR, I'd skip close to the end of the video, but we're going to go through everything. I'm going to be text-to-speech Badger for you here, but I'll try and break down it as much as I can. But right before we do that, if you like this kind of content and you want to see more content of me actually deep diving into core mechanics of Path of Exile, or you want to see more build guides or anything like that, the best thing that you can do for me right now is to hit that subscribe button down below and give a like to this video. I know it's a very obvious thing that all YouTubers say, but I can't stress enough how much it actually does help me as a content creator. So if you just want to do those couple of clicks, that would be super, super awesome. But enough self-promotion, let's get right into it. So this is posted by Chris himself, but this is obviously not just Chris's decision. This is the entire decision from Grinding Gear Games and everything like that, I'm sure. But we're just going to go through it all. Let's start. We're going to be making some further changes to harvest crafting in the release of 3.14 in April. In short, we're concerned by how deterministic some harvest crafts are and how easily players can near perfect items. We don't feel that this is consistent with how Path of Exile's itemization should work. Before we detail what changes are coming, we want to explain a bit about Harvest's initial implementation and our design philosophy about items and crafting. So you can already see that this is setting the tone for what's going to happen. Big nerfs. Get ready. Our initial plan for harvest crafting. So using currency items like Exalted Orbs and Chaos Orbs on your gear is a powerful, risky, and exciting way of improving it. We all know that. But because of how these items work equally well on both low and high level equipment, it's generally considered to best save them until you're crafting your endgame gear. Many players would even argue that it's best to save them to trade for already crafted items. Very, very good point if you're in a trade league. In either case, using valuable currency items on your leveling gear is generally perceived to be non-optimal. This is true in the current game. When we were designing the crafting mechanics that would be the reward system for Harvest League, we wanted to experiment with a system that allowed you to craft items while leveling, using the equivalent of powerful currency like Exalted Orbs, so that players could get the experience of using valuable currency items without feeling bad that they're missing out on future value. Our goal was to make a system that was so attractive that players would try to improve their items by throwing a few crafts of them in almost every area they play. Towards the end of Harvest development, it became clear that this was a very powerful crafting system. We had hit our goals and then some. The question was whether we should preemptively nerf it before players saw it or try it out with the league at full strength. We decided to try it out. The data we'd get from players interacting with a very powerful crafting mechanic would be very helpful with our ongoing work deciding the appropriate power level of crafting opportunities in Path of Exile 2. So basically they're saying they launched with the powerful version of the crafting, some modified crafts, and upon playing the league, the crafting side of it was an immediate hit. Players easily filled gaps in their builds while leveling and made many, many mirror-worthy items. As our concern over this grew, discussion started about how to adjust things as we eventually integrated into the core game. So this is where they start talking, right? Integrating harvest crafting into the core game in 3.13. So this is their ideas of what they've actually done this time around. They decided to integrate Harvest into the core game as map-only content. Harvest crafting while leveling went fine during the Harvest League, but pretty much every league has some item acquisition mechanic that occurs while leveling, so we didn't think it was necessary to have Harvest on top. In the endgame, Harvest crafting allowed creation of some ridiculous items, mostly via a set of deterministic crafts that interacted with specific types of mods. This had to be toned down, and we had to choose between two ways to do it, either by removing the dangerous crafts, or by keeping them as rare possibilities and then balancing by rarity. Decided to do the latter, so that's what we get. We get, the rarer crafts being obviously rarer. The good crafts would stay in the game as very rare outcomes. We didn't remove any crafting options other than the ones related to the process of growing a garden as they became redundant. The ones that gave like extra juice to your, extra harvest life force or whatever. with the garden maintenance mechanic being removed. So in 3.13, we released an integrated version of Harvest where players stumble across groves full of crafts and they hope they get the most valuable deterministic ones. We hope that this would still keep the most valuable crafting options available while limiting the most abusive crafting to just very lucky or successful players. Analysis of the integration. So this is where they're taking what we've seen in this league and looking at it, all right? So let's try not to make judgments yet. I'll explain my thoughts about everything at the end of all of this, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this implementation. I know I'm actually expecting the majority of the comments to be negative about this, but we'll see. With Harvest integrated into the core game of 3.13, players still made ridiculous items. Hands up here, I made ridiculous items. I'm still making ridiculous items. Even the crafts we made quite rare felt pretty common when the entire community was pulling them together and using them on right items. The second issue was that players felt overwhelmed to get so many crafting options. It was possible for up to 100 or so crafts to be given to the player per grove, and this caused people to feel obliged to consume them, otherwise they would be wasted. I just basically gave up on that side of things. The result of both these factors was that players had access to a basically unlimited medium power crafting and had to RNG hunt the best crafts, which they could store for later. Players also expressed frustration that the most effective way to get the best items in Path of Exile was to join a Discord channel, try to trade those incredibly crucial crafts. Exactly correct. The first part of this that concerned us was that Harvest was critical in making the best items and hence made any other game systems obsolete. Good point. The second part, while it was inconvenient to trade them, became far less of a problem if we can solve the first issue. Our problem with all of this can be summarized with the following thought. Why would I use a regular Exalted or Divine or a Null Orb when I can get one through Harvest that has a deterministic result? The entire rest of Path of Exile's crafting system is somewhat redundant with Harvest crafting in its current form. I very much agree with this statement. While we are glad that we tried the experiment of keeping all the crafts and balanced by rarity, it is unfortunately going to have to change. This is where things get a little bit dicey, alright? Path of Exile's item philosophy. Let's go through this. At its core, Path of Exile is a game about the acquisition of powerful items. When we were designing Path of Exile, a critical aspect of item acquisition is that it is through random rather than deterministic means. So whether you, let me just put a forward here, whether you like it or not, I'm just going to say this is controversial, whether you like it or not, these few paragraphs, this is Path of Exile's item philosophy, and this is what they want to try and stick to, okay? Whether you think it's for good or for bad, this is just them explaining, this is what Path of Exile's item philosophy is about. That doesn't mean it might not change in the future, but this is what they're at right now, okay? When you defeat monsters and bosses, you receive random items. When you approach Kadira for a valuable item, you're offered a random one rather than one you can control. When you craft an item, you receive a random modifier. In limited cases where you can choose a specific modifier, it's usually worse than what could have been rolled randomly. Even game systems specifically intended to involve determinism, such as divination cards and incubators, still have amounts of luck involved. It's also important that items are hard to perfect. Ideally, there's significant diminishing returns in the currency item crafting process, which lets players get something good enough relatively easily, and expert players can show off with some really good items that took a lot of effort to make. Obtaining perfect items is ideally close to impossible, with very few players able to claim that they have such valuable treasures. We feel that the current state of Harvest crafting runs against both of these important philosophies. I agree with that statement. We know that many players would love us to keep deterministic crafting in the game because it enables them to complete their items far more quickly than they would otherwise but then there would be nothing left to achieve. It was an interesting experiment, and we understand that some players will likely be attached to this level of incredibly easy crafting, but it's just not the Path of Exile we set out to make. This sentiment was summed up by a member of our design team who recently said, "We don't want to take away the feeling of closing your eyes and exalting an item. Scared to see whether you ruined it or not." This is really, really good, right? Upcoming changes in Path of Exile 3.14. So in 3.14, we're making some changes. The first three are direct nerfs to Harvest, and the second two are improvements. It's also worth noting that Harvest Atlas passives have been adjusted to accommodate these changes. Previously, So first point, previously every seed in a patch granted an instance of that seed's craft. Now only some of the seeds do. So you're getting far fewer of the crafts that were overwhelming people with their quantity. Higher tier seeds are closer to the 1-to-1 ratio from before. So first of all, this one is just to basically cut out bloat of harvest. You get into a map and you don't have 100 instances of a craft. You have maybe now 30 or something like that, right? Some mods that had overly deterministic behavior have been removed. These include all annulment mods, other than the ones that remove a mod that isn't specific. This is crazy. All annulment mods, other than ones that remove a mod that isn't of a specific type before adding one of that type. So the non-to specific are staying, but everything else is gone. And all type-specific divine mods. You cannot type-specific divine anymore. Very interesting. Thirdly, crafts that add mods of specific types, like physical modifiers, for example, to items can now only be applied to non-influenced items. This is a crazy nerf to how harvest crafting works, okay? Crazy. Except for the existing mod that applies an influence mod to an influenced item. That still exists. So add an extra influence mod to an item. The chance of encountering... Okay, so number 4. Sorry, this is now the last two, which are buffs, right? The chance of encountering a portal to the Secret Grove in a map has been increased by 60%. So it's, what, 5% now, right? 60% increase is now 8%. It's not actually much of a buff. It maybe is a little bit of a buff. And then lastly, the Heart of the Grove encounter is now a map fragment that sometimes drops from tier 4 harvest bosses, instead of randomly appearing in place of a normal harvest groves. This allows you to trade the encounter if you don't feel up to it, and means that finding the Heart of the Grove when you're in a map with difficult mods doesn't lead to an impossible encounter. Lastly, overall, this is undoubtedly a heavy nerf to high-end harvest crafting. You said that correctly. Chris, you said that correctly. But we strongly believe that it is in Path of Exile's best interest going forward, and there are still a lot of compelling harvest crafts that make the Grove worth running at any point in map progression. Alright, I'm going to do a couple of FAQs, or maybe a couple of questions that people have in chat while I just finish off this video. I'm not going to talk much more though. Honestly, you're going to get a lot of the discussion on my Twitch and other people's Twitch. If you want to come watch this live at twitch.tv/thisisbadger, I'm obviously going to be talking a lot, and you can ask me live on stream what I think about, more specifically about my opinion and all of this kind of stuff. But also comment down below. I'm getting ready for the barrage of comments of screw GGG. I know that's going to happen a lot, right? But I want to know what you guys think, all right? There's going to be a lot of contention on, you know, the whole idea of, well, deterministic crafting feels really shit for you know, standard, you know, 2 hour, 1 hour a day players. And honestly, I agree with you. I do agree. It's a big nerf to harvest crafting, and depending on how it pans out, I think harvest is going from one of the most important and overpowered things to something that will hardly ever be used or be used in edge cases. That might be a little bit extreme, but this is one of the hardest nerfs we've seen to a league mechanic ever, if not the hardest nerf we've seen to a league mechanic. I'm scared to go and look at the Reddit post already. I know that Reddit's going to be a little bit insane, but I will say that your frustration might be justified in this case. I'm usually defending GGG quite a lot here, but this is a heavy-handed nerf. That being said, I don't know a better option. I actually don't know a better option that's not going to still keep... put it this way, I agree that harvest crafting in its current form is too powerful. I agree that right now it's too powerful, but I think that this was too much of a nerf. We will see. That's all I'm going to say. Otherwise, I'm going to start rambling, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Once again, if you enjoy this kind of video, hit that sub button down below, and make sure you let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. If you've got any ideas for how you could do it better, let me know. Please let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Badger out.